and welcome to episode 43 of Roll, Play, Grow, the podcast for tabletop entrepreneurs, creators, and fans. I'm Courtney Stover of Lighthearted Ventures, and in this podcast, we talk to the creators behind the brands in the tabletop role-play gaming space about who they are and how they are turning their passion for gaming into a career. Today, we get the pleasure of hearing from the dungeon master of a still new yet increasingly popular D&D actual play podcast, Reckless Attack. Nathan Lurs joins me today to chat about this podcast, which was years in the making, and then we pivot to chatting about social media marketing. This episode is longer than usual, but to be honest, that's partly because Nathan and I are friends in real life, and this is just what happens when you're friends, but also because he's full of some amazing advice that I did not want to cut short. And on a fun note, if you head over to my new Roleplay Grow Patreon, you'll be able to see a behind-the-scenes photo of the last time there is photographic evidence of Nathan and I hanging out together. It's a really great photo, y'all. I am not even exaggerating. It was from my graduation party from college that he attended. And while Nathan and I definitely had a conversation about when was the last time we actually saw each other in person, this is the last time we had photographic evidence of it. So get ready to see baby Courtney and Nathan at the age of, 22? So what do I mean by my new Roleplay Grow Patreon? In case you missed the last episode, I've got a couple of business updates for you. The first is to announce that after some feedback about our Lightheart Adventures Patreon being a bit confusing, I decided to split Roleplay Grow off into its own separate Patreon, and I just launched it this week. This will allow posts to be more streamlined and less confusing. So if you want to support the show, you can go to patreon.com/roleplaygrow, and you'll find a tier as low as $3 a month. Perks include having early access to the guest list, being able to add your questions to upcoming interviews, behind-the-scenes content, and shout-outs on my website and the show. I would love if you'd go check it out and help me work towards some of my goals, like trying to hire an editor, because y'all, editing takes a long time. I'd also like to take a bit of time to chat about a new affiliate. Now, the ones that y'all are used to hearing about are definitely more TTRPG focused, but this one is for my fellow entrepreneurs who are looking to upgrade your email marketing. I started using Flowdesk to make gorgeous emails that are completely automated a couple years back, and I cannot speak highly enough of them. You can see an example of this by going to lightheartadventures.com. If you have pop-ups enabled, within a few seconds, you'll see a sign up show up for a free D&D one-shot, or if you have pop-ups blocked, there's a couple other ways throughout the website where you can sign up for it. That sign up is powered by Flowdesk, and then it emails you a free one-shot and adds you to an automated email workflow that I set up a while back. If I'm being honest, I really need to go in and update that workflow to be more relevant content. But frankly, that's super easy to do. It's very user-friendly to make new gorgeous emails, and it's really simple to schedule individual emails or create a workflow that messages your contacts week after week. If you use my affiliate link, you'll get 50% off your first year. Then the first month is free. Go to lightheartadventures.com/our-favorite-trinkets to learn more about Flowdesk and all our other favorite things. Okay, that's all for now. So let's go chat with Nathan. I am so happy to now introduce y'all to a personal friend of mine, Nathan Lurs, the DM for the very funny frog-loaded 5e actual play podcast, Reckless Attack.
Hi, Courtney.
Nathan. Hi. Oh my gosh.
This is very exciting. We've already been chatting for a lot pre-show, but also it's now being recorded and there's somehow even more enthusiasm now.
I mean, I'm just excited because, to be honest, I have not recorded an interview in a really long time. And secondly, is the fact that we have been friends for a long time now.
A very long time now.
And we never knew that we had the same type of nerd in common when we were actually living in the same city. And I'm mad about it.
Yeah, no, or at least not this particular same kind of nerd. We knew we had a lot of nerd overlaps, but and I'm sure we'll talk about it later. But in this specific one, our nerd D&D or tabletop role playing game progression through life was not lined up in the same way. So we were two ships passing each other in the night.
I know. And then you reached out to me on Twitter once and you're like, hey, I'm starting a podcast. And I'm like, what?
Yeah, right. Yeah. No, and I felt the same way of like when you announced that you had a podcast, also was like, wait, what?
Amazing. Yeah. I've been listening to some of your interviews. I will admit I am not caught up. I'm sorry. I'm trying. But
there's never, I never accept anyone's apologies for being behind in content, because that is the curse of the internet age, especially if you're a content creator. There's a lot of cool stuff out there, and there's a lot of cool stuff out there being made by like actual humans that you care about as people. And it's just a lot, and it's too much. And just the fact that we can still be like friends and supportive and whatever, even if we aren't caught up on the latest episodes, I think we can all just like live a little happier. Just accepting that, you know?
True. But yeah, you keep mentioning Dice Dojo, and
yeah, it's been really funny. For those who don't know, I guess we maybe I'll talk about it in the intro, but Courtney and I knew each other in college, yada yada yada. We both were in Chicago, and there was a friendly local gaming store called the Dice Dojo that was really close to where our college was, relatively close at least. And it is very integral to the formation of Reckless Attack as a podcast. We go into it a lot in our various interview episodes and behind the scenes episodes. And it's been really funny hearing from people like you who also were in Chicago, who were like, wait a second, I know the Dice Dojo. That's a real place. I also played games there or whatever, or learned the game or bought dice or bought whatever nonsense there. So it's been really funny to hear the number of people who have connected to the Dice Dojo as a location that was also somehow meaningful or formative for them in their gaming careers.
Yeah, I mean, it really was formative because that was the first, I guess, big board game store that I never really been to, because before that point, I was like, yeah, Monopoly, sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I had no clue. And again, we can talk about it more specifically, but yeah, it was absolutely my actual introduction to actually playing D&D and all the broader scope of games contained therein.
Yeah. Well, let's get into that. So tell me, when did you get into tabletop RPGs?
Yeah.
And, yeah. How has this journey started for you?
It's murky at the start, and not in a like dark, dour way, just in a like, my memory's bad and a lot of things happened all at once. So I don't, it's really interesting that I've thought about this a lot, and I do not know how I first kind of heard about like tabletop role-playing games and D&D specifically. It was just kind of one of those things that I feel like I was just aware of in the culture, and had always been, a nerdy individual, and always been someone who liked creating stories and being creative and playing with friends and all that good stuff. And I just had never been introduced to it really. So my first real, I feel like, exposure to it was a couple things at once. Kind of first and foremost, podcasts. I loved D&D podcasts in like college and just after graduating college, and I still do, obviously, but that was just like what I consumed was D&D podcasts. Acquisitions Incorporated was the big one for me. That's the one with the Penny Arcade crew, who was being DM'd by Chris Perkins. That was kind of the first one that I really remember, and the other big one was Critical Hit, which is a 4E podcast that I think is still going on weekly somehow after like 12 years. But I craved this content. It was, I joked about it. It was like I was the middle-aged stay-at-home mom who craved my stories, and those were the podcasts. It was not soap operas. It was D&D podcasts for me, and I just mainlined it constantly, and loved the friendship, loved the dynamic stories, all of it. Loved the D&D vibe, but I had no one to play with. And then in college, I was a journalism minor. Basically, I actually graduated one credit short of having a journalism minor, but like I feel like I can round up, and I worked as a journalist for a while, so it's fine. But one of the classes that I had gave me the assignment of going out into a quote unquote subculture. And, so it could be a music scene, could be a whatever that means to whoever was doing the assignment. And I chose the Dice Dojo, and I chose to really get a look into what playing D&D was. And so I went. I just, totally unannounced, just kind of showed up and talked to the people who own the store, talked to the fellow gamers. I just sat and watched people play and was immediately like, oh, okay, this is actually very good and interesting. And then the next week I came back and I played. I actually got to play, and that was so cool. And immediately I was like, oh, cool. So my Goliath barbarian jumps off a stalagmite and parkours up here to attack this thing and does all this crazy stuff. So it was like I got it like immediately. And and I actually met a person who became a member of the Reckless Attack podcast there. And other members of the Reckless Attack podcast also met that person that I met also at the Dice Dojo. So like truly it was like core to our experience. But as soon as I kind of had those two influences and then got even just a tiny bit of interest from my roommates and my girlfriend, now wife, and her brother, it was like off to the races. Yep, this is what I want to do. This is my new hobby now. This is what I crave all the time. And if I'm not playing it, then I'm looking for another opportunity to play it.
So talk to me about the transition from starting to play to, you know what, I want to make an actual play podcast myself.
Yeah. It's always, that's always such an interesting question for so many people, and one that I love just like casually asking people to, because it is weird, right? But for me, for us, I had always felt like I wanted to create something. I don't know if I assume that's a fairly common experience, especially with us creative, gifted kid types, where it's like, yes, clearly I will be writing the next great American novel or whatever. Obviously, with time and therapy, I have, managed those expectations and standards for myself. But I had always thought that could be a cool, fulfilling thing. And podcasts were always, very much on kind of the radar of that. But I knew very early that if I was going to do it, I wasn't going to do a bad podcast. I wasn't going to settle for something that was just kind of, half-assed or was poorly produced or whatever, or wasn't to my taste. And so it really always kind of just took a back burner. And then I started playing with the group who became the Reckless Attack crew. And it was just awesome. It was so good. Our whole kind of home campaign was so impactful, so meaningful, so educational for me. And towards the end, I had heard that other DMs would just throw their phone kind of in the middle of the table to record the session, and then they would go back and listen to it, and that would be a learning tool for them. And I thought that made a lot of sense. I was looking to make myself a better DM, and that seemed like a perfectly reasonable way to go about doing it. And so I did, and then I'd go back and listen to it, and I liked it. It was good. Like the stuff we were putting out was I liked it. And if I knew that if my enjoyment of it surpassed my natural anxiety and natural self-criticism, then that must mean that it's at least worth pursuing. And so I kind of floated the topic with some of the other people, and they were very interested and had always also kind of been interested in doing a podcast for anything D&D or otherwise. And then just kind of momentum started building. A COVID hit, so that threw things off a little bit, but here we are today with a whole podcast out into the world.
I love that so much. And it's interesting. Like, I don't know that I've actually heard that answer yet on how it started. I feel there's so many people that would record their session just to have it for reference, would always be like, oh my gosh, this is interesting. Like, okay, I guess we were having fun, but I don't know that I would ever want anyone else to listen to this.
Totally.
But the fact that you're able to just listen to it and you're like, no, this is good.
Yeah. It was genuinely surreal. Like, it was that I even now, like, and I feel very, very proud of Reckless Attack. I feel very proud of my work in it and everyone's work in it. But I don't like listening to it often. Like, I I don't like the sound of my own voice. I am definitely a person whose brain, while appreciating the good parts, will err on nitpicking my own choices and my own, didn't nail that NPC voice the second go around, and those sorts of things. And then to experience something where I could just listen to it and be like, wait a second, my brain isn't melting down at the being confronted by this. So what does that mean? Oh God, it was almost like an existential experience. But yeah, immediately was like, oh, hold on. This is a real thing that we could do, and that we, kind of capital W, we, that this group could do together if we wanted to, and if we had the buy-in and kind of had um, the courage and the fortitude and the friendship to do it, that we could.
I love it. And you guys definitely have a really great dynamic. But I want to make sure before we get too far into the logistics that for any of the listeners who have not listened to Reckless Attack yet, first off, after this episode, please go fix that. Go download the first episode. It's amazing. But can you give us a high level kind of look at what Reckless Attack is, what you guys are doing? And I mean, the question that I know everybody hates, but what makes it unique?
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's the question, right? That's always what it boils down to. So Reckless Attack is a 5e podcast. We play Dungeons and Dragons. We release every Tuesday, and our goal is not to be, oh, hey, we are another podcast that that is just, oh, we're friends sitting around a table. But our goal is always to make it feel like the listener is another person at the table with us. We have high quality audio that we make a really big priority, tight editing, but lots of just fun dynamics between the players who take the game really seriously, who take our friendships really seriously. We do a lot of collaborative world building. We have a deep lore and deep world. We have a lot of mysteries. We have, high heroism. We have villains. We have rivals. All the big emotions that we love, at least in our D&D games and in our D&D podcast, are all in there. And also, we have like a lot of frogs. And we have a lot of cute baby animals and also horrible monsters all at the same time. So really you get a nice wide span of experiences, even in our first couple dozen episodes of Reckless Attack. And really the boil down is friendship and frenemies and frogs. And that's really just like kind of our whole deal.
There are so many frogs and I love it so much.
And it's really funny where it became a little bit of a joke early. And it really became, it was something that people glommed onto and became something that other people who listened to our podcast and supported us would bring up in conversation to other people. And then so people go into our podcast being like, okay, frogs, I get it. I'm sure that, what do they mean when they say a lot of frogs? And then people get to like episode 3 and they're like, oh, it actually is a lot of frogs. But we think we do it in a way that is not, we try hard not to be a lol random kind of podcast, but like through the natural occurrences of gameplay, many frogs did make an appearance. So, we believe we deliver on our promise of frogs is the point.
Agreed. So walk me through the logistics. I guess how you got this group fully together to commit to doing this show. And then I know that COVID hit, but just what was the timeline? What were the steps that you took to be able to get that first episode to release?
Yeah, it was a lot, to be honest. And again, because I think I certainly came in with the opinion that if we were going to do it, we wanted to do it right. We wanted to have our first episode be something that we were happy with, proud of, that we thought stood up to, a casual person just hitting play and then being surprised at like, well, wait, this is very polished. This, everyone's on the same page and it's tight and it's fun and there's personality and it all flows well. And that was kind of the standard that I wanted to make sure we had. And immediately and independently, everyone else was on the same page. Like that was the mindset everyone had and everyone wanted. So it was like a real blessing and real barrier removed that everyone wanted to work really, really hard to make it great. And so that was kind of the easy, once we had that bridging conversation of like, hey, so like, do you want to do a podcast maybe? And everyone was like, yeah, I think we should do a podcast for sure. Then, yeah, all those wheels kind of started turning. I am a naturally indecisive and people-pleasing person, but also, and that works both ways, good and bad. So very quickly, I talked to the group. We decided we wanted to do something set in a new world just because, we had created our own world for our home campaign, but we didn't want there to be like inside jokes or inside knowledge that people who weren't at our table wouldn't understand. And kind of from there, I would ask everyone, okay, cool. We would do the kind of lines and veils. We would do the session zero stuff just to kind of start asking, okay, what story are you guys interested in? What's the vibe? Especially if we're going to be hypothetically playing this for a long time, let's make sure we all agree on what that is and that I'm delivering the tone that you guys want. And from there, I came up with, and I should try to find this document. It's somewhere on Google Drive, but I came up with, I want to say like 8 campaign pitches maybe or something like that, where it was just a couple paragraphs. It was a little couple bullet points of tone and here's how much combat I think it'll be and that kind of stuff. It's very inspired by the Matthew Colville campaign pitch document for anyone who's familiar with him on YouTube. But I came up with that, and then we had another meeting where we picked all of those things apart and kind of crammed together what we liked. And then I came up with a whole big pitch, and it was essentially going to be fantasy Star Trek, where we would all be going across the world through these new strange portals, and they were kind of an inspirational team of heroes who were hand selected to go and be ambassadors and be problem solvers and meet new people and, explore the world, basically. And we were all super jazzed about that. And then COVID hit. And so we couldn't record because we wanted to at least have our first few episodes be in person, just so we could kind of capture the dynamic of friends around the table, right? And as COVID kind of simmered and I simmered further, I was trying to do what little more polishing that I could on the campaign. And I was listening to a lot of people. I think I even listened a little bit to like Asians Represent podcast a little bit was really big for me and a few other ones. And I really kind of came to the conclusion that that first campaign was maybe bad or at least maybe bad for Dungeons and Dragons because a lot of the best Star Trek episodes, for example, are not solved through combat. And if they are, then that's a bad thing. But like D&D is a combat game and you should be killing monsters in D&D. And if you're not killing monsters, then like maybe you shouldn't be playing D&D, or at least like there's a lot of better systems for capturing that. And also, if we're jumping around, meeting all these civilizations, am I going to be respectfully creating new cultures and new cities and new histories as we go? Will I be copy pasting the same thing over and over? And neither of those seemed good either. So we had to start all over again and scrap the whole thing over COVID. I approached the group with it and they were immediately on board. They totally got it and agreed with me, which was a huge burden off of me. And eventually we got back to world building and we ripped everything apart and we started building again. We played a game of Microscope after a while. I don't know are you familiar with Microscope, Courtney?
I am not.
It's a really cool game. It might be a little outdated now. I'm sure that there's some other games that might be newer and maybe more updated, but it is a world building game essentially where you as a group basically build a timeline, a history together. And what is so cool about it is that you can't override the decisions of anyone you're playing with. You can only kind of yes and. So all of the bits and bobbles are totally individual, where it is one person coming up with one idea that is now canon. And that is a little chaotic and can make a little bit of a messy timeline sometimes, but also really lends itself to a really rich world that has all kinds of messy storylines, which is what the world is, right? Where the world is not just kind of one cohesive happening. And we played that for a couple days or a couple sessions, and that just filled me with so much inspiration. And then I ran off. I, hammered out some more ideas. We talked more about another campaign pitch doc, and then we kind of had what we wanted. And then David and Jonathan are two wonderful, powerful, producers and editors, kind of went off and really honed in on what we wanted our sound to be. We tested out a bunch. We got some microphones and all that good stuff. And we kind of just decided, okay, we can't stop and think about it anymore. Let's just get recording. Let's get going. We had a couple of test episodes just to get everyone comfortable on mic that were probably won't be released to the light of day, but we're just like fun. Let's all play together and get used to the characters and that kind of stuff, which I highly, highly recommend to anyone starting out an actual play. And then we just picked October 5th. That was going to be our release date. And I started tweeting more and yada, yada podcast.
Yada, yada.
Exactly.
Okay, well, you know that I have to get into the details on this show. So
by all means.
I'm interested in knowing, you mentioned earlier that you wanted to at least the first couple of episodes in person. Are you still doing them all in person?
But for the most part, yes. And we've kind of been able to strategically work around a lot of COVID surges. We're also all very highly vaccinated against COVID. And we've also now kind of worked to, if and when we need to have a better remote setup, and we feel more confident in that. But we wanted to make sure that our selling point for us was going to be the kind of natural chemistry that we had. And, just as a group of friends who really care about each other, who care about playing the game, who care about supporting each other and interacting with each other and bouncing things off of each other. And to do that remote, we didn't feel super confident in our ability to do it. Many others can. And I think with video, we'd be now better at it. But at least for those first intro episodes, you get such a small window of time for an actual play to catch someone's attention, right? Like if the audio's bad, if it's boring, if it's anything, that's all kind of one check mark to be like, nope, there's a lot of other content out there, move on, pass. And so we wanted to make sure that when we did record, that we were going to give our best foot forward in those first few episodes. And I think we did. But it also meant that we had to delay starting our podcast until COVID was COVID. We had gotten we'd been fully vaccinated, and everyone was saying like, yes, you can go say hi to people in person again for the most part, and that kind of thing. So definitely, I think it made a difference for us in our first few episodes, and has continued to make a difference. Though I feel like we could, we've already talked a lot about how we can not do that in the future, but it was really about knowing what our strength was and not being willing to compromise on getting something out earlier just for the sake of getting something out, and making sure that what we had represented who we were and what our show could be, and have that be the first exposure that people had to us.
Yeah, I think there's definitely something really special about being able to play in person, even for just a home game, let alone for a podcast where you're trying to put on a performance and be entertaining while also being entertained.
Yeah, exactly. And I personally, we never finished that first home game. We kind of got caught up in being like, oh, cool. We have this podcast idea. Let's work on that. Like, we love our game. We love these characters, but like, we have this goal. So let's pause and let's work towards that. And then COVID happened, and so we weren't playing anything. And so we decided to finish our campaign and actually get to end it, which was one of the coolest freaking things I've ever done in my whole life. But even in that, I could tell that, there was just those awkward pauses over Discord, and the, oh God, I forgot to unmute myself and all that kind of stuff. And while I think now that we've trained on mic discipline and trained on all these other things and have gotten into the swing of things and have kind of showed people, hey, this isn't how we usually sound, and you get it, I think we could pull it off more. But yeah, it's difficult sometimes if you don't have that built-in energy, rapport, or comfort, especially if you're not doing it with video, to for me at least, to capture that same enthusiasm and connection that we knew that we had a lot of and wanted to highlight.
Yeah, definitely. What is the setup like when you guys are all sitting around the table?
It's very funny. COVID happening was, in many ways, for the podcast at least, gave us a lot of time to really optimize what we wanted and that kind of stuff. So here's the piece of advice. Be sure to take your time to a little, to a certain extent. If you're starting a new venture, make sure you have put yourself in a good position for success. We actually just have a room essentially in two of our players' house who are married that is a pseudo, kind of dining room situation that then converts to a recording room. And we all just sit around a table and we all have mics and a couple of little soundproofy panels up on the side. But otherwise, then it is really, other than just mics being in our faces, just kind of the same as any group who is sitting around a table and playing D&D together.
Do you guys have the same kind of mics? Is it just
we do,
whatever
yes.
anybody has? Okay.
Yes. Yeah. So we all, that was a big thing for us again. And we wanted to make sure that our podcast had everyone having the same audio quality, everyone sounding clear, everyone sounding good, because I know that can be a distraction for me. And we wanted to make sure to make sure all of our edges were rounded as possible for people to get into us.
Cool. How far ahead of episode release are you recording?
Really, it depends a lot. Holiday, I think we launched with, I want to say 5 or 6 maybe in the bank. We released 3 at once, just to give people, or 1 or 2, was it 3? Doesn't matter. We released a bunch at once, and then I think we had another 3 or 4 weeks, locked and loaded, ready to go. We like to give at least 3 to 4 weeks to edit each episode, because we do edit pretty tightly, even though we're not an audio drama and we're not editing out dice rolls or editing out, too much stuff. We want it to still feel like people playing Dungeons and Dragons. So usually we want to make sure we have like a couple weeks in advance in the bank, but also the holidays and some other stuff cut into that. So we're actually right now in the middle of a like week, almost week by week level of like, woo, we're just getting this in time kind of thing. So it fluctuates wildly. I know that we would love to be, at least have a handful banked at any given time, but we also like playing D&D a lot. So I'm not too worried about us building back up now that things have settled back down a little.
Honestly, I feel that so much. The 6 weeks before my surgery back in October, right. I was like, okay, I have to get as many things recorded as I possibly can. And it was really kind of nice because I was so used to just being so behind all of the time.
Yeah.
And having a backlog is amazing and definitely something I would recommend to anyone who wants to be a podcaster. Build like at least a month worth of backlog.
Oh yeah, for sure. And we also, and we talked about this a little bit, and I don't know how I feel about it. I'm still kind of reconsidering it or mulling it over. But we also wanted to make sure that for the most part, it was still fresh, like we didn't want to have like, oh, here's an episode from 6 months ago that we recorded of gameplay that we're airing just now. We wanted to keep it relatively relevant and fresh and whatever, and responsive to what the audience was feeling and doing. And that also naturally leads to maybe a little bit less of a backlog than we like, but also kind of keeps that freshness and energy and all that kind of stuff going. So it's a balance, and there's no right answer for anyone. And I'm not even sure if our answer is the right answer for us every time, but it is the answer that we have. So shrug, but have a backlog is the point.
Yes, find the backlog that works for you, but still have one.
Exactly.
Hey, entrepreneurs. I love introducing you to new creators every episode, but I could really use your support. I would love to invite you to join our Patreon page, where you'll gain access to behind-the-scenes content, add your questions to upcoming interviews, and you could even receive a shout-out on our site in an upcoming episode. To learn more, go to lightheartadventures.com/RPG. And now, back to the show. Well, so I'm curious on if there's anything different about your process of being the DM for a game that's being produced on a podcast versus how you DM if it's just a home game.
Yeah, I think there's a few things for sure. I think, well, first, we really do try to pride ourselves and focus ourselves around the idea that for the most part, this is the game we would be playing, and we don't want to play to the crowd, so to speak. We don't want to tell jokes just to be like, I know the audience will understand that reference and that sort of thing, or manufacture dramatic moments just for the sake of it. Try to keep it authentic feeling and keep it centered and focused on us and what we like doing and what we think is fun and cool. So I think that's kind of a first important place for us to start. But for me as DM, something I've really had to improve on and get better at is really keeping the lines of communication open with my players. And I think I've always done a pretty decent job of that, but especially when there is that pressure of like people are watching us or, listening to us, I guess, in our case, are consuming our content, then there are a lot of factors of pacing, of whatever, and of me getting into my own head and having these grand ideas that are not necessarily clear to everyone, or maybe even don't even align to what people like, because that's, that happens sometimes when you're not talking and setting expectations and soliciting feedback and that kind of thing. So I think for me personally, that has been really, really important, is saying like, okay, guys, I'll just go out and say, here's kind of what I think this week is going to be like. This recording session, we record 2 episodes at once. And I say like, well, I think maybe it's going to look like this and that. And I think the next couple episodes will kind of vaguely be like this. And that was horrific for early DM Nathan to to consider, where like I'm not in complete control of the narrative, and I guess more specifically, I'm not in control of the surprises, right? And the twists and turns and all that kind of stuff, which in some ways I miss, but in way, way, way more ways, see how valuable that is and see how much comfort that brings and how much that allows the players to kind of settle in and focus on what they like, what they want to do, what their character wants to do, and how they would react to those sort of things, and just kind of hone in accordingly. Certainly, I also want to be mindful of like combat's not dragging on too long and being more descriptive with things without droning on and all that kind of thing. But I think that's really, in terms of the back end of things, what's been really impactful for me in a really, really helpful way that applies off mic too.
That makes a lot of sense.
It truly took some of the players just essentially saying like, hey, this would be helpful. It was not I want to make extra clear that it was not my idea to be doing this. We had done some of it early, but I think maybe it was David who put it this way, where essentially when you're playing at home, you can you can pause for a minute and talk about what's going on, or you can in between sessions talk, or in the lead up to sessions or whatever. But when you're doing a podcast, you're kind of ready to just like show up and record, right? And like, sure, there's chatting, there's banter, there's whatever, but you're there to play, and like you have a schedule. You can't go on for too long because we have deadlines and we have an episode to release. And if we don't get 2 episodes out of this recording, we have to reshuffle some things. And so it's easy to kind of get caught up in that and just only be there from the time that you're recording and make sure that the recording time is usable audio, basically. But so much of D&D happens when you're not creating content, and making sure you're checking in with the players and making sure you're telling them, hey, here's what to expect, to an extent. I mean, again, I keep it very vague. I keep it very like, hey, you're going to get some time to talk to some NPCs in the city. So think about what you want. You're going to get, there's going to be a combat this week. So like all that kind of stuff, I think has been really helpful, or at least I've heard has been really helpful for the players, and something that I think all DMs should consider doing if they want that extra level of kind of buy-in and preparation, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I want to follow up on something that you said a little bit ago. Are you recording multiple sessions in one day?
Yeah, so we usually meet at 7, which means that we just chat until like 7:30. But we release hour-long episodes. That was also really important to us, as we wanted to keep it listenable, keep it not daunting. I know that some podcasts are just like, yeah, we turn on our mics and then we play for 2.5 hours, and like that's what you get, even though it's edited down. We wanted to make it just weekly hour episodes because, like we said, there's a lot of content out there and there's a lot going on, and so we wanted to keep it nice and manageable. And so yeah, we usually play for like 2.5-3 hours, which includes like a 10 to 15 minute break in the middle, and that's kind of our usual pattern.
Yeah, I guess I want to know more about just the whole process from you are getting ready for a recording day, you play for the 2.5 to 3 hours, like you just said. And then what happens?
Yeah, I mean, really, it is just as kind of as simple as I have been extremely blessed in a whole crew of people who are available and interested in editing, which is, I think, the one of the strongest parts of Reckless Attack. Just the editing generally, but that there are multiple people who are willing to do it, which is, I feel like, a very large cause of burnout in a lot of podcasts and a lot of other such creative endeavors. But yeah, really, it is just kind of as simple as then whoever is on deck to edit that week, and the editors, I am not one of them, even though I did audio editing previously. My lovely players were like, no, you focus on like social media and on DMing and all that other stuff. But they just have their own schedule, and they have identified, okay, cool, it's your turn to do this episode, and kind of just go accordingly. And they, between them, do a kind of like peer review, basically, where it's like, hey, can you just give this a quick listen to make sure I didn't miss anything big? And it kind of has like that 2-factor thumbs up process. And then another person, Steve, listens to it and gives us our very puntacular and or referential episode titles as another pair of ears. And then we schedule it and go, and then I yell about it on social media.
Gosh, that sounds amazing to have a team to split up editing duties.
It is. We've long said that is a really nice competitive advantage, honestly, for us. And you're a solo operation, and many others are, especially for interview folks. So it's not as much of an option. But if you're listening to this and are on a podcast or considering starting a podcast and you're not editing, and your potential control freak of an editor will allow you to edit, you should really consider it, even if just once in a while, because editing is hard and it takes a lot of time and a lot of brain power. And it's not for everyone, but it's for a lot more people than you would kind of think. So help your editor out. Maybe throw an edit their way sometimes. That's really great. And yeah, it's, I think, been a huge, huge difference maker for us, especially because we're releasing weekly.
Absolutely. Like, that's kind of the main reason why I got behind, is that I could not keep up with my own editing for a bit there. But
right. I mean, and exactly. And if there were, especially with weekly, if it was just one person, or if it was me, or I know for a fact, if it was just me, we would have missed episodes, like, period, 100%, because life gets in the way, or it takes longer than you hope, or just your brain is not cooperating that week. And we are lucky enough to have a group of people who are all enthusiastic and highly capable editors to pull it together and support each other and figure out their schedule and just do whatever makes it work in a sustainable, hopefully, way.
Definitely. Okay, I do want to switch gears a little bit. You've mentioned social media a few times.
Indeed.
And I know that you are honestly like this guru at building a presence. I know you're working on a fun little document that might be available at some point.
I am.
So yes, please, let's talk about marketing. Let's talk about social media. And I mean, I guess we can start by, what is this document and what's coming up?
Yeah, so to set the scene a little bit, I after graduation from college, I worked as a journalist for many years, and then worked in PR and marketing, mostly just generally PR. So kind of throughout that, I got a lot of expertise on boiling down complex topics into things that got attention and were easily digestible and connected with people. And I don't mean in a clickbait way. I just mean in a let's find the way to make this the most exciting and enticing version of itself that it can be. And that is something that I think has helped us a lot, certainly, and kind of continues to help us a lot, even as we deal with our own busyness and our own kind of changing priorities and changing availabilities and just being tired sometimes. Is that we have all of that to kind of lean back to. But I've noticed, especially on the online space, and at least a lot of the tabletop role-playing game portion of the community that I'm most exposed to, because that's where I just lurk all day, every day, that a lot of people don't have that kind of baseline knowledge that I have, because why would they? Like, that's a specific skill set that, plenty of people live perfectly content, productive lives without. And so something that I try to be a resource for and be available to talk through and and whatnot is kind of that ability to boil down your podcast, your stream, your product, whatever, into something that hopefully will turn into a brand identity and turn into something that will catch attention by the people who might be interested in it. Not everyone, because your goal, as I'm sure you know, Courtney, your goal when marketing or when doing PR is not to get everyone to listen to your show. Your goal is to get people who might be interested in your product aware of it, and then convert them to be like, hey, do you like frogs? Great news. Here's a podcast that has frogs. And like, cool, great. So yeah, so something that I've been working on for quite a while. And I tweet about frequently, and there's a lot of other really, really great people in the community who also talk a lot about this, and especially from a marketing side or a number side or a digital marketing side. I only really know the PR and writing side, but I've been working on kind of some tips to help people find their identity and agree on it, and kind of at least put their best foot forward in the online space. Again, this does not guarantee success at all, but it is at least kind of gives you a couple tools to kind of start working with.
Are you willing to share any of those tips right now?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's the whole point of it is that it is definitely not secret. I love talking about it. It's really important, and is not. I think the best and most frustrating parts to me is that none of them are. It's not secret knowledge, right? It is just knowledge that people haven't been exposed to. And so it's all about making sure that people are aware of it. So I'm always thrilled to talk about it, because there's so many good products out there, and so many great people working so hard whose stuff it just isn't getting traction because they don't know how to catch people's attention appropriately. So first and foremost, it needs to be sustainable, whatever you're doing. Like you can't burn out. If what you're doing just causes you to burn out, then it doesn't matter. Like if you're so burnt out you can't keep creating the thing that you're marketing, then like that it undoes all of the stuff that you have done. But kind of first, I think what's really important is that that a lot of people do not start with positivity about themselves and their products. I don't know if you've seen it, but I know I have a lot of people who, for example, Reckless Attack. I could easily say, and I think I even joked about it earlier, I could easily say, hey, we're just another 5e podcast, and we're just a bunch of people and friends sitting at a table having fun. And that's fine. But it kind of starts you off at a lower peg because you have kind of undersold yourself. And instead, you can say, or that we say, is that, hey, we are a group of people who want our audience to feel like they're playing games with friends, right? And that's so much nicer and so much more positive and so much more energetic than, undercutting yourself, or, you're not creating just another subclass for the barbarian. Instead, you've made like the path of the righteous fury, and like, here's a bunch of cool reasons why it's cool and different. And, the takeaway being like, you are unique, you have a unique perspective, and your version of whatever it is that you are doing is worth doing because you created it, and it's worth being excited about it for that reason. And, excitement and confidence are so contagious, and it has to start from you. So no matter what, personally, internally and externally, you have to start at a place of being positive and finding ways to turn all the quirks of your product, all the interesting bits, all the exciting bits into selling points and into strengths, basically. Also, kind of throughout that, you obviously have to be authentic and truthful when doing it. You can't say, hey, we're a frog podcast or a frog forward podcast, and then be like, well, there's two frogs. What the heck? People will immediately get that and will be disappointed and will, kind of forever associate you with like, oh, they did lie to me that one time. So don't do that. And then kind of from there, once you are kind of in your set of your mindset of positivity and mindset of kind of realistic, here's who we are and here's what we offer, then you can kind of boil all that down into figuring out what makes your product stand out, it's a busy online, it's a busy space on the internet. I don't know if those of you who are on the internet have experienced it, but there's a lot of people there, and a lot of people who are loud, and a lot of people who say a lot of things. And so you now have to enter into that if this is how you're marketing. And essentially, you have to take what gets you excited enough about your project that you work on it day after day and do the editing and do the brainstorming and do all the frustrating bits, that has made it worth it and makes you want to put it out in the world. And then you just kind of condense that into a few sentences or bullet points or whatever. And that's kind of a great place to start. And it's a way essentially for you to make a promise to yourselves and to your audience that here's what we're about. Here is, if you're interested in these things, you'll like us. And if you like this part of this one show, you will like us. Or that kind of thing is, can be a great way to have some shared talking points and shared attitudes and shared priorities and shared promises for you to kind of further boil it down, throw some fun bullet points, throw some gifts, throw some arts, throw some whatever, and stick to those kind of like promises and to those themes, and rotate through them and change things up and try new things while still kind of sticking to those core messages, and you'll already be in a much nicer place, basically.
There's so much that I could dig into in this. I
By all
wish
means.
that could do like 3 hours.
Again, you're listening to part 1 of the
honestly,
interview.
Yes, probably. So one thing that I know a lot of people would listen to this everything that you just said and say, yeah, I think that sounds great. I don't have time. I'm working a full-time job, and then I'm making all of this content on the side. And, how can I possibly devote enough time to make my presence actually known? What would you recommend?
Yeah, so it's a little tough, and tough both as a problem and tough as an answer, unfortunately. Where if your goal, especially on Twitter, which is where I spend most of my time, and I feel like a lot of at least the tabletop role playing game community that I'm aware of, where that is located, it is not just a platform; it is an algorithm and is a tool to be manipulated. And Twitter rewards people to a certain extent who interact a lot and who are on there a lot. And that is just kind of an unfortunate reality. And there's no quick trick or to get around that. It is just the case. And so it becomes a delicate balance. And this is where it comes back to sustainability, and also comes down to what are your goals and what are you willing to do to get there. But you kind of either have to, especially early on when you're building your following and building momentum, you have to be posting a good amount, and you have to be posting on other people's stuff a good amount. And that changes drastically for different people, and it changes day to day and week to week. And some weeks I as a power user of Twitter do not, cannot find it within me to post as much as I would like, or react to other people as much as I would like, to both reward the algorithm and to build community and friends and fans who will help you spread the word, right? But there's just kind of an unfortunate reality where there is work beyond the work of creation, where creation is central, and it has to be central, right? Of making your thing and making it the best it can be, and making it, you, and making it something you're excited about and something that you love. But then there is more work, and the more work is then finding that audience and connecting with people, and being part of a community, and being authentic and making friends, and not just treating them as consumers, right? And being real. And unfortunately, if you can't put in that extra work, then there is limits to, within reason. Maybe you can get lucky and go viral or something, right? But for most of us who are not going viral, or who are not fueled by star power or whatever, are just indie folks, that is a part of the process. Or you can, and that's totally legitimate and celebratory, if you just engage with it as much as you can, And again, that can change day to day. That can change if you have a new product that you want to get out there, you can be engaging more, whatever. But there aren't shortcuts, unfortunately. And again, I am not even a huge account. I am we are a medium account, I would say, or like a small medium account, maybe, at least as of recording this. And that is just kind of the best information and knowledge that I have from people who are more experienced and have followings and also are kind of actually privy to how social media marketing works and those sorts of things. So it really, a lot of it is just, it's a lot of the work that you put into it. And sometimes, and sometimes even that is not enough. And a lot of it is finding a great scene to be a part of, finding, like-minded individuals who like your stuff or like you and are willing to be partners with you essentially in kind of your rise together, and so many other things. But yeah, I unfortunately there's no silver bullet, especially for those of us who are kind of at the indie level and the hobby level and the, hey, this is a cool thing that feels important to me. That it's just more work, unfortunately.
Yeah, for sure. What are your kind of thoughts or opinions these days on the hashtag trends of TTRPG solidarity and TTRPG rising and things like that?
I think, I guess what I'll say is, well, first of all, I will hedge all of this by saying I don't understand the algorithm quite well enough to be like, yes, well, here's the metrics behind using hashtags or whatever, other than don't use too many hashtags in your posts. Use like 1 or 2 max. And even then, whatever. Hashtag days, again, for anyone who is not familiar, there's a lot of like Follower Friday and Work in Progress Wednesday, and basically just larger creators giving smaller creators or peer creators opportunities to share their work on their platforms. And it is hard work for certain. It is it is really, especially if you're doing it a lot. And like I would post to, God, I don't even know how many, especially in our early days, dozens every week. And that includes finding all of them and then customizing some of the language to the individual person who is there. And that included interacting with other people and, so many other things. And without getting into any like algorithm, whatever, because it really doesn't matter. It is, again, it's another example of it's a lot of work, but if you do it in a productive way, and if you do it as a way to network and as a way to find other like-minded people and find other projects that you're excited about and get other people excited in your products, and to use all those fun talking points and bullet points and things you're excited about to get more people excited about it, then it works. That I think was a huge part of what got us a platform, was the amount of work that we put in on those days, and of course many other days, and the quality of our work on those days and that kind of thing. But again, there's path forward for everyone, and not everything works for everyone, and not everything works the same week. Again, it's a week to week. I have backed off on a lot of those to make sure I'm managing my own energy levels and burnout levels. But they are a great way to introduce yourself and your product in a snappy, memorable way and meet other people. So, they are useful, especially as you're starting out and trying to make connections with other people.
Yeah, I would agree. I feel like the first couple of months that we joined those as Lightheart were great. Like we doubled our follower count.
Yeah.
I mean, our count was very small at that point. But then once we hit 600, it was like, didn't seem to matter how much we did it. It was interesting.
Yeah, it's yeah, I have started to hit a little bit of a cap myself, and I don't want to gloss over. I don't give too much kind of general advice or specific numbers, because it does matter. It changes a lot for person to person how much you're putting into it. But also it changes a lot of like, are you changing up your copy? Are you changing what your promos are? Are you being the most effective with your promos and like, and connecting with people genuinely? And are you also posting throughout the rest of the week and interacting with people outside of those hashtag days to continue fostering those relationships? Like there's so many variables into what makes it good or bad or successful or not, that it's hard to give kind of too much specific advice beyond kind of what we already talked about.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting when you have the mental capacity to devote to it, and otherwise it's a lot. It's a lot of work, but
it is
everything
a lot.
takes work.
Exactly. And that's kind of honestly, that's kind of the beauty and the terribleness of it, where you can both take comfort and frustration in knowing that it's just more work. and if you're willing to work at it and be open to feedback and be open to growth and be open to figuring out what works for you, and not just in the pacing of things, but in the copywriting of things and in the promotion of things and the finding out of what people are interested in and finding out new audiences to connect to, new people to connect to, then it's just a matter of being an authentic person and putting yourself out there and trying to make connections and putting in just kind of the hours to do it. But also, if you don't have the hours to do it, or if you're just not feeling it or whatever, then it definitely becomes daunting. And it's something that I face a lot, something that I've certainly faced the last couple months even. And so again, it changes, but it also means that if you miss a week, if you miss a month, or if you don't do one of the hashtags, it's fine. Like, those people are still there. They're still out there. You haven't lost them forever. It is just, you didn't get them this week. They didn't see your stuff this week. And it's about getting in front of people eventually and, continuing to get in front of people. And I think the number is something like this. And this is something that I've heard in the community, certainly not of my own expertise, but essentially it is, people need to see your stuff 8 times before they will interact with it. Like, to see it 8 times. And that is, an interaction is obviously not even that big of a promise, right? It is, I will click on this ad or this clip, or I will follow you or whatever. So it really is just a volume game psychologically and algorithmically. And unfortunately, that's just kind of how it works, Yeah,
that's advice or kind of some stats that I learned when I worked for a direct sales company, in their home office. And it's just, that is how it is.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Okay. So I know that we technically hit time, but I still have to ask my signature questions.
By all
That's
means.
what editing is for.
Exactly. I'm here for it.
Perfect. Okay. So I would just love to know that, I know you guys started thinking about this a long time ago, but you've really only been publishing your episodes since August?
Yep. October. Yeah. October 5th was the big day.
It feels like I have been listening to it for so long now, and that's not long. Wow.
It also feels like we've been doing it for so long. It's really, I was thinking about this earlier this week, kind of in preparation for this conversation too, but of how it was really just a switch got flipped. There was definitely a couple weeks of okay, it's getting real. We have it recorded. We have it edited. We've been doing all the work. And then just especially because we're weekly, just that's what we did. And it was great. And again, it's because the whole frickin' group are rock stars and powerful individuals and just the coolest people in the whole world. But it's just been cool. This is our lives now. And it's doing this podcast in a great way. And it's so fun. We're still having so much fun together. But it also feels like it's been longer because we've been active and putting out stuff all the time.
Yeah. Well, over the last couple of years of planning and then the last few months of producing and publishing and everything.
Yeah, it was 2019 when we first started having those conversations.
We're already in 2022, so that's actually been a really long time, even if it doesn't feel like it.
Yeah, exactly. Where and again, this was all very slow brewing and whatever, but I think we were going to launch. I don't remember if we had a specific date, but we had kind of a soft idea that we were going to launch in 2020. And then COVID happened. Yeah. And so that was not the case.
Yeah, for sure. Well, through all of that, what would you say has been the most challenging part?
Yeah, a couple things. Certainly, apropos of our last conversation has definitely been getting ourselves out there. And definitely we went in wanting to make sure that our podcast was the best it can be and something that we were proud of and something that we thought that if people heard that some people would enjoy it, and that was our goal, is just to create something that we like and that we're proud of. And we've been met with a really wonderful response and whatever, but it was a lot of work. So that, at least for me personally, that was a really big challenge. And also, of course, getting over oh God, our stuff is publicly consumable and therefore publicly critiquable. But that hasn't been, actually surprisingly hasn't been too bad. But then something that has been a challenge, I think, has been the name of the game being sustainability. It's easy that first few months to be just absolutely powering through because you're so excited. You're connecting with people. It's also stimulating. You have product out there. You're doing new stuff. You're recording new sessions. Everything is fresh and new. And then we are coming up on 6 to 7 months of releasing it, and it's the enthusiasm is for us is still there, but it's easy to burn out of that honeymoon phase basically. And so every step that we've taken, at least we've tried to make sure that we very, very seriously consider, okay, can we do this? Do we have the the emotional time, or the emotions, the time, the energy, the whatever to put into this? Because we do not want to make this an unenjoyable job. We want it to still be fun. We're working very hard, of course, but it has to be still fun and still a good time for all of us. And so that has been, I would say, not necessarily a difficulty, but something that we really have to continue kind of fighting for, even as we're all on the same page with it.
Do you have plans to do seasons with some breaks in between, or you're just going to be all one season going until you're not?
Yeah, so we don't really, actually. It's interesting because honestly, again, we just love playing D&D so freaking much. Like we have had a couple of times where we haven't played for like a month, right? And all we've been doing is just kind of, still social mediaing and still editing and all that kind of stuff. And we hate it. Like we're all we're all miserable when we're not playing D&D together. So it really is actually just like, well, yeah, we just want to like keep playing D&D. And we have some plans certainly for like, oh God, if we're feeling burnt out or, something happens or whatever, there's a life reason, fill in the blank, that we are okay with taking a break, and just be like, we don't have an episode this week. We have worked for 6 months to prove, hey, look, we can release episodes every week. And our audience, we have to trust that our audience will believe us, that we will be back. Right. And, but yeah, honestly, we love playing so freaking much that like there might be delays, there might be whatever, but yeah, we're right now, not to jinx it, or overly speak for the group, but right now we're just having a great time and we're coasting along, and we'll have bonus content, maybe some side campaigns sometime, something like that. But yeah, we're having fun playing. So
cool. I love it. To flip things around then, what has been the most rewarding part of everything thus far?
Once again, I'll say two things, and they're kind of similar, actually. But really, first of all, has been going on the journey with friends. I have a lot of certainly artistic vanity, and I like feeling like, I am accomplishing something, right? And someone has said something nice about something that I did, and that being a nice, intoxicating feeling. But being able to truly, truly partner with the 4 other incredible people on the podcast and feel good about it and feel we're all pointed in the same direction and feel like it's a safe space for us to talk about things and to offer suggestions and to say, hey, I don't love this. And can we work through it? And having that be such a good, even when it is hard, having it be such a productive friend-based activity has been just like amazing and so unique and so what you hope it's going to be like. And it has been that. And that has been, I've become so much closer. I was already friends with them, but I've become so much closer with all of them. And I really cherish them as individuals and as partners and as creatives and all of that. So that has been extremely rewarding. And then, having people listen to it. Like we've gotten messages of people who have said, hey, your episode this week made my week better. And I was having a terrible time and you made me laugh, and that turned my week around. And that is the coolest freaking experience. And of people who actually enjoy it and have real fans. Someone DM'd us a fan fiction of our podcast. Like, what? We've gotten fan art. What we're doing is affecting people and are making them happy. And we're not trying to be too high of art, though we take it seriously, but to know that it's making a difference and that it's connecting with people is really powerful. And we're so privileged and lucky to have that be the case and have people who are willing to actively kind of reach out and be like, hey, just so you know, this was great. It's fantastic.
I love that so much. I mean, y'all are making a really great show. And
thank you.
I say that as someone who's really picky and kind of doesn't like most actual play.
I know. Well, and that was always our thing, and why I was so early surprised that I liked what I was hearing is because I've listened to a lot, and I've tried a lot, and I know how easy it is to throw a phone in the middle of the table, or to just do whatever, or also to have something that is perfectly fine, but something just turn off an audience. And our goal had definitely always been like, we know what we don't like, so let's be what we like, and let's have high standards. And so that means a lot to hear. Y'all
are definitely one of my favorite shows. So thank you for making it.
Thank you. Thank you for being a loyal listener, Courtney.
Are there any upcoming projects that you're excited about or goals you're working towards?
Yeah, so we have a few things that we want. We're hoping 2022 is going to be a place where we really start to kind of solidify a real good path forward. Especially because, again, when we launched, we had no idea anyone was going to listen. We're like, cool, maybe we'll convince a couple of real life friends to listen to the first 3 episodes and then go from there. But what we're really most excited about right now, and that we can really talk about a lot of, is we also do interviews on our show, and it's every 2 weeks. Again, I was in PR and journalism for a long time, so I've done a lot of interviews, and I wanted to use those skills to give a platform, much like you, to the creators in the community, and as a way to connect with them and a way to let them show their personalities and their perspectives and their experiences to our audience, and to show off their cool products and all that good stuff, and just have a nice, awesome conversation. We release that two times a week on Thursdays. It's called Reckless Talk, and I have loved it. I've gotten to interview, I think, all of the cast members now. We've gotten to interview a couple of community members, and all of them have been so wonderful and so enriching and so freaking funny and poignant and all that stuff. And so if you like this show and want even more interviews, then we have plenty of that there. And so that's something we're really, really excited about. And then, of course, we're always churning out, little guides and homebrew things and nonsense memes on Twitter, and, and regular Patreon content of behind the scenes conversations and that kind of stuff. But those are the main things. And, weekly episodes on top of all that.
Yeah, just a couple of things. Yeah. That's fine. Well, Nathan, if people want to find you and Reckless Attack and all the cool things that y'all are doing, where should they go? Absolutely. So first, recklessattack.com. That's a nice catch-all. We also have a link tree that has all of our things, like our Patreon and our Ko-fi. I don't remember which one it was. I always say coffee. I learned which one it was, and I remembered not liking it, and I don't remember which was the answer. But we're also very active on Twitter. That's kind of the main social media place for us. That's reckless_attack. We are on wherever you enjoy listening to podcasts, including YouTube, which is where we post a lot of clips of our show that kind of give you a nice feel for what the experience of listening to our show is like. So if you're interested and are just like, hey, I don't want to commit to like pushing play on a whole series, that's a great place to start. We also have a Tale Till Now episode, which recaps our first arc, as another way to just kind of like yada, yada, yada through a lot of this stuff and try to catch up a little bit faster. But otherwise, those are kind of the main spaces. Again, we have a Patreon where we do a lot of awesome bonus content and talks amongst our crew and all kinds of stuff. And so find us anywhere on those platforms, basically. Perfect. I'll have those all in the show notes. Thanks. Nathan, this has been amazing. Yeah, it was so fun. I'm so happy to actually talk to you with our voices. Yes, for the first time in a long time. Our human meat voices. Yes, human meat voices. Thank you so much for joining today. Yes, thank you for having me. You just finished another episode of Roll, Play, Grow. To check out the show notes from today's episode, you can go to lightheartadventures.com/RPG. To keep up with every episode, please subscribe on your podcast player of choice. And if you're enjoying the show, I would absolutely love if you would leave me a review and share this episode with your friends. Your review might even get featured on an upcoming episode. To follow me on Twitter, you can either find me at lightheartadv for our business account or at KetraRPG for tweets on gaming, my dog Bowser, and other random shenanigans. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next time on Roll, Play, Grow.